Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan's military says it has shot down an Indian quadcopter which violated the airspace in Sangh sector along the line of control. In a statement, Army's media wing said UAV intruded 600 meters inside Pakistan's territory for surveillance, which was aggressively responded to by its forces. The Inter-Services Public Relations said such unwarranted acts by Indian Army are a clear violation of existing air agreement between the two countries. The media wing said this aggression reflects Indian Army's consistent disregard for ceasefire understanding of 2003. Pakistan's health ministry says over 570 patients have recovered from COVID-19 across the country. The ministry said total infections have reached over 4,400, with 248 resulted positive in the last 24 hours. It said the death toll has jumped to 63, with 5 new fatalities in one day. The ministry said over 2,700 tests have been conducted since yesterday, taking the total number to nearly 45,000. Meanwhile, Chinese ambassador to Pakistan, Yao Jing, met Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi to discuss the COVID-19 situation. Yao Jing said China will continue supporting Pakistan in its fight against the outbreak. Qureshi said it is heartening to see China bouncing back to normalcy. India continues with its heavy-handed tactics in occupied Kashmir, even as the world doubles down in the fight against the coronavirus. The valley has been under a curfew and communications blackout since India stripped the region of its autonomy in August last year. Since then, several political activists, including former chief ministers, have been arrested to silence dissent. One of them is Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front's chief, Yasin Malik, with his family complaining he is being denied free trial. Malik has been in New Delhi's Tihar jail since last year, when he was arrested on 2-year-old charges of separatist funding. Prior to that, he had been placed in protective custody in Srinagar following the Pulwama attack in February 2019. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has left the JKLF chief even more vulnerable amid a surge in the number of infections in the valley. While Malik has been in jail, India has continued strengthening its stranglehold on occupied Kashmir. Recently, the Indian government introduced a new domicile rule in a clear attempt to change Kashmir's demographics. On Pakistan's side of the LOC, Azad Jammu and Kashmir President Masood Khan has termed the law a war crime. All of these actions have turned occupied Kashmir into a powder keg, which could blow up, with India already under stress because of the coronavirus, as well as unrest over the country's recently passed citizenship laws. In Italy, 542 more people have died from the coronavirus outbreak, taking the country's death toll to nearly 18,000. In the US, 1,850 people have died in the last 24 hours, raising the country's total fatalities to over 14,700. Globally, the death toll has reached over 88,500, with nearly 1.5 million cases. More in this report.
The number of infection cases of the new coronavirus continues to rise across the world. In the US, New York, the hardest hit state, has reported its highest number of coronavirus-related deaths in a single day. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has released new guidance for people working in essential areas such as healthcare and food supply. The CDC director says employees can return to work as long as they take their temperature, wear a face mask at all times, and practice social distancing. Meanwhile, British Finance Minister says Prime Minister Boris Johnson's health is improving.
The latest from the hospital is that the Prime Minister remains in intensive care, where his condition is improving. I can also tell you that he has been sitting up in bed and engaging positively with the clinical team.
In Germany, 246 people have died in the last 24 hours, taking the total death toll of the country to 2,107. Meanwhile, China's National Health Commission has reported 63 new infection cases, of which 61 were travelers arriving from overseas. China has also released new measures to try and prevent asymptomatic carriers of coronavirus from causing a second wave of infections.
Moving on to India, where the doctors, health workers, along with Muslims, are being attacked and assaulted amid coronavirus pandemic. The country has reported 182 deaths and almost 5,600 virus infections across the country. 2 female doctors in the capital were assaulted by a man, saying their presence will spread the virus. The medics told media that they were attacked upon confronting the individual and other locals. Meanwhile, Muslim families in Punjab were forced to leave their homes after being accused of spreading the virus. Talking to media, they said locals attacked and asked them to leave the village, saying Muslims are carrier of the virus. The communalism against minority has increased since the Tablighi Jamaat has been accused of spreading the virus across the country. Pakistan has boycotted South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation's video conference on COVID-19 hosted by India. In a statement, the Foreign Office said the meeting was not held by the Secretariat of the regional body. The office said activities such as trade officials' video conference can only be effective if spearheaded by SAARC Secretariat. It said since the Secretariat was not part of the video conference, Pakistan chose not to participate. The Foreign Office said SAARC Secretariat also provides the requisite convening platform and support structure for essential coordination and follow-up. India has been actively working to take over SAARC since forcing a postponement of the bloc's 19th summit in 2016, which was to be held in Islamabad. Pakistan's Foreign Office has summoned the Afghan ambassador to express its views on the arrest of ISIS Khorasan leader Aslam Farooqi. In a statement, the Foreign Office said Farooqi was involved in anti-Pakistan activities in Afghanistan. It said Farooqi must be handed over to Pakistan for further investigation. The office also said Islamabad's position in this regard was regularly being shared with the Afghan authorities and those concerned. ISIS says it has fired 5 rockets at a US air base in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. In its statement, the militant group said it targeted a helicopter landing pad at Bagram base. In a tweet, a NATO-led mission, Resolute Support says there are no casualties in the attack. It said Afghan National Security Forces are investigating the incident. Meanwhile, the Taliban have said the group has no link with the rocket attack on the US forces. The attack comes as the Kabul administration said it will release 100 more Taliban prisoners today under the Doha peace agreement. Yesterday, the Afghan government also released 100 Taliban prisoners. The Syrian Foreign Ministry has rejected claims that the government carried out chemical attacks on a town in Hama province in 2017. The accusation was made in a recent report published by the Organization for the Prohibition of the Chemical Weapons. In a statement, the ministry termed the report as a fabrication of facts. It said the publication is based on materials prepared by the Western propaganda organizations. The Syrian government has repeatedly denied accusations that it used chemical weapons. The OPCW's report claims Syrian planes dropped poisonous chlorine and sarin nerve gas on a village. Libya's government of national accord has bombed a convoy of militias affiliated with LNA's Commander General Khalifa Haftar. GNA-led Burkan al-Ghadab operation said the attack took place in the south of capital Tripoli. In a social media post, it said the convoy was moving along the road between the towns of Tarhuna and Bani Walid. GNA said the convoy also included 2 armored vehicles belonging to the United Arab Emirates. Meanwhile, the European Union has called for an end to attacks on Libya's medical facilities in capital Tripoli. Earlier on Tuesday, shells targeted Tripoli's Al-Khadra General Hospital, injuring several people and damaging the building. The Saudi-led coalition has declared a halt military operations in Yemen to support UN efforts to end a 5-year war in the country. In a statement, the coalition says a comprehensive ceasefire for 2 weeks starts today to work for stopping the spread of the coronavirus.
Military coalition spokesman Colonel Turki al-Malki says the ceasefire is open to extension, although no virus cases have been reported in Yemen so far. Just before the declaration of ceasefire, the coalition said Houthis fired ballistic missiles on Yemen cities of Marib and Hodeidah, while the Houthis media claimed the coalition strikes hit Hajjah and Sada provinces. The Houthis said they have sent UN a comprehensive vision, including an end to war and blockade imposed on Yemen. Spokesperson Mohammed Abdul Salam said group's proposal will lay foundations for political dialogue and a transition period. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has also announced to contribute $525 million to UN humanitarian and coronavirus response plan for Yemen.
Iraq's President Barham Saleh has named intelligence chief Mustafa al-Khadimi as prime minister. This is the third nomination in just 10 weeks as Iraq struggles to replace a government that fell last year after deadly protests. Khadimi's nomination comes as the previous designated prime minister, Adnan al-Zurfi, withdrew after failing to secure a majority in the parliament. Khadimi will have to amass support from Iraq's legislature to approve a cabinet within a month. Adil Abdul Mahdi, who resigned under pressure from anti-government protests in November, is still a caretaker prime minister. Welcome back. In Iran, the death toll from consuming toxic alcohol has reached almost 600, with over thousands hospitalized. A judiciary spokesperson said more than 3,000 people were poisoned after drinking toxic beverages in the misbelief that it can cure the coronavirus. The spokesperson warned that alcohol consumption is not a cure and can be lethal. He said many alcoholic drinks are being produced illegally in Iran and lack the required standards. The official said they have arrested a number of people over the bootleg booze, warning that arrestees will be dealt with decisively. So far, 3,993 people have died in Iran from the coronavirus disease, with over 64,000 infections. Health authorities in Middle Eastern countries have reported new cases of the coronavirus on Thursday. Since appearing in China last December, the virus has spread to at least 184 countries and regions. Qatar confirmed 166 new coronavirus cases, bringing the total number of people with the virus to 2,376. Lebanon confirmed 7 new coronavirus cases, taking the total to 582 infections. Kuwait's health ministry registered 55 new infections, putting the total at 910. Oman recorded 38 cases, bringing the total number to 457. In Israel, the number of cases has risen to almost 10,000, while the death toll stands at 79. The country remains in a state of lockdown until Friday for the Jewish Passover holiday. Meanwhile, the UAE has sent aid planes to multiple countries, including Pakistan and Colombia. Taiwan has slammed accusations from the WHO's chief that it passed racist remarks against him. Speaking in Taipei, a foreign ministry spokesperson said WHO's accusations against Taiwan do not represent reality. She said the WHO chief should apologize to the country. The spokesperson said Taiwan does not encourage its citizens to pass racist remarks. On Wednesday, WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus rejected racist slurs against him, which he said had originated in Taiwan. Taiwan has taken effective measures against the coronavirus, logging just 379 cases and 5 deaths to date. The WHO says the novel coronavirus is spreading fast across Africa, with more than 10,000 cases in the continent already. In a briefing, the Global Health Body's regional director for Africa said over 500 people have died and a lot more needs to be done. WHO Regional Director Matshidiso Moeti said recovery rates in Africa are at 9.4%, slightly lower than that of the other regions. The director explained it is because people in the region have pre-existing health conditions and countries have weaker health systems. She said 18 countries in Africa still have fewer than 20 confirmed cases, and there is still an opportunity to contain the threat. Coronavirus cases have so far been reported in 52 of the 54 countries on the continent, with over 550 deaths and 1,400 recoveries. Ukraine and Russian-backed separatists have agreed to another prisoner exchange during a video conference of the Trilateral Contact Group. In a statement, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the sides agreed on the lists for the mutual release of the detained persons before April 19th. Russia's envoy to the contact group, Boris Gryzlov, said this was the only progress achieved at the meeting. Gryzlov said the Ukrainian side did not use this opportunity to establish a social political dialogue with Donbass. The European Court of Justice has suspended a disciplinary chamber of Poland's Supreme Court over questions about its independence. The chamber was set up in 2017 by Conservative Law and Justice Party to handle disciplinary cases against judges. In January, European Commission asked the ECJ to consider disciplinary chamber, arguing it was not up to EU standards of judicial independence. The ECJ ruled judges being subject to discipline from the chamber will affect their own independence. Under Poland's judicial reform, judges can be punished for questioning and criticizing government's decisions. Opposition politicians have criticized the reforms as an attempt by the ruling party, Law and Justice, to control Poland's justice system. In December, Poland's Supreme Court warned country may have to leave EU if the judicial reforms continue. In the UK, Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, has announced a £750 million package to keep struggling charities afloat amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Announcing the move, Sunak said the government cannot match every pound of spending the UK's 170,000 charities would have received this year. The move follows concern that some charities are facing collapse with income shrinking because of the enforced shop closures.
So today I'm announcing £750 million of funding for the charity sector. £370 million of that funding will support small, local charities working with vulnerable people. We all know who they are, those small charities in our villages, our market towns, in pockets of our cities.
Bigger charities such as Oxfam and Age UK have already furloughed 2/3 of its staff. Now moving on, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says this is not the time for retribution against China over the new coronavirus. Pompeo said it is too soon to talk about consequences for what US officials believe is Beijing's slow reporting of the extent of COVID-19.
Addressing a news briefing in the White House, Pompeo said the U.S. is re-evaluating the funding for the World Health Organization, but he said there is no time to change the leadership of the WHO. His remarks come after President Donald Trump accused the global health body of being China-centric. Responding to Trump's statement, the UN said now is the time for international unity and not to make assessments of global response to the pandemic. In the statement, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said once the pandemic is over, there will be enough time to analyze the emergence and spread of the virus. Guterres pointed out thousands of health body staff are fighting the pandemic in the field on the front lines. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus called for a halt to politicization of the global health crisis. He specifically urged China and the United States to show honest leadership.
Racial disparities have emerged in the US COVID-19 death toll, once again bringing disparities in access to healthcare to the fore. In some states, data shows that a majority of the coronavirus-related deaths have been from minority Black communities. This has been acknowledged by US President Donald Trump, who says his administration is engaging on the problem. Details in this report.
The coronavirus pandemic has once again exposed health inequality in American society. Preliminary data from the states of Louisiana, Michigan, and Illinois shows most of the deaths are from the Black community, sometimes by an overwhelming majority. In Louisiana, over 70% of 512 COVID-19 victims were Black, while the community only makes up 33% of the state's population. The uproar these figures caused forced U.S. President Donald Trump to acknowledge the problem.
And we're actively engaging on the problem of increased impacts. This is a real problem, and it's showing up very strongly in our data on the African American community. And we're doing everything in our power to address this challenge. It's a tremendous challenge.
Community leaders and public health officials say the disparity in deaths reflects more underlying diseases among the Black community, as well as lower levels of access to healthcare.
We've known literally forever that diseases like diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and asthma are disproportionately afflicting the minority populations, particularly the African Americans.
The COVID-19 outbreak in the US has already had a major impact on the debate surrounding public health in the country. The racial disparity in the epidemic's casualties is likely to polarize the narrative even further. Unless the outbreak lasts into winter, 2020 is an election year for the US.
The president of EU's ERC Scientific Research Council has resigned after 3 months on the job. Mauro Ferrari said he lost faith in the system after he failed to set up a special program to fight the coronavirus. The head of EU agency complained about the lack of solidarity between EU states as well as institutional resistance. He also criticized bureaucratic infighting, preventing him from working on an effective pan-European response to the virus. Ferrari said he now wishes to be away from offices in Brussels where his political skills are inadequate. But the Research Council said his resignation followed a written, unanimous vote of no confidence. The Council said it regrets the resignation of Ferrari at this early stage in his mandate as ERC president. Disney's new video streaming service has hit more than 50 million subscribers since its launch 5 months ago in the US. The service originally set a target of 60 million to 90 million subscribers by the end of fiscal 2024. Disney Plus had reached 26.5 million subscribers in February. Since then, the subscribers have almost doubled as more people are online and stuck at home due to the virus clampdowns. Disney Plus, which rivals Netflix and Amazon Prime, rolled out to the UK and other parts of Europe last month. All three streaming platforms are enjoying a huge boost in viewing figures as cinemas remain closed and people are forced to stay indoors. A three-man crew blasted off to the International Space Station, leaving behind a planet overwhelmed by the coronavirus pandemic. A NASA astronaut and 2 cosmonauts took off at Expedition 63 from Baikonur Cosmodrome, Kazakhstan. NASA said the crew told ground control that they were feeling fine just before they successfully entered the orbit. The crew will join Expedition 62 commander and 2 NASA flight engineers who are scheduled to return on 17th of April. Under usual circumstances, the departing crew would have faced questions from a large press pack before being waved off by family and friends. But no one was present this time around because of the travel restrictions imposed over the virus. Lows and the highs of the business world. The International Monetary Fund has warned that the coronavirus pandemic will trigger the worst fallout since the 1930s Great Depression. Speaking in Washington, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said the outbreak will turn global economic growth sharply negative in 2020. She also said the crisis would hit emerging markets and the developing countries the hardest. Georgieva said if the pandemic faded in the second half of the year, the IMF expected a partial recovery in 2021. She said governments have already undertaken fiscal stimulus measures of $8 trillion, but more would likely be needed. The World Trade Organization has forecast global trade to plunge up to 32% this year, worse than the 2008 global financial crisis. WTO Director General Roberto Azevedo says COVID-19 has completely upended the global economy and international trade. Azevedo said WTO forecasts reflect enormous ongoing shocks to supply and demand. The WTO said nearly all the regions will suffer double-digit decline in trade volumes in 2020, with exports from North America and Asia to get hit the hardest. The WTO warned against protectionism and said keeping markets open to the international trade and investment will help economies recover more quickly. The Geneva-based trade body said it is forecasting a rebound of up to 24% in global trade for 2021, depending on pandemic duration and the policy responses. The UN says the Asia-Pacific region is not on track to achieve sustainable development by 2030 if the world continues its business as usual pathway. It says conventional GDP-centric model has led to persistent inequality, with the top 10% income group taking away almost 50% of the total income. UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific 2020 survey said high economic growth in the region has been accompanied by growing income inequality. It said the economic prosperity has come at massive social and environmental costs. The survey said if transition towards cleaner production is not made, a total of $675 billion economic loss is expected annually due to climate-induced disasters. Wall Street stocks have jumped as investors looked past staggering jobless numbers. The markets were also lifted after the Federal Reserve released a $2.3 trillion program to cushion the fallout from the coronavirus. The U.S. Labor Department said over 6.6 million people filed jobless claims in a week, which the Federal Reserve showed up with its program. Dow Jones Industrial Average wrapped up its best week in more than 80 years. The S&P 500 index gained nearly 2%, while Nasdaq Composite also traded fractionally higher. The dollar got weakened, while crude oil extended the gains. Earlier, Federal Reserve reiterated that the U.S. Central Bank was committed to using all its powers to help the country recover. European stock markets are trading higher, eyeing weekly gains on hopes lockdowns may be slowing the coronavirus spread. There has also been some buying in risk assets after a softer dollar. London's FTSE 100 is trading over 1% higher after cinema chain Cineworld stocks gained 12%. Bank of England's announcement to lend government money to fight COVID-19 if it fails to raise funds from debt markets also picked up the sentiment. Frankfurt's DAX has gained over 1%, while CAC 40 in Paris is trading nearly 1% higher. Meanwhile, international benchmark Brent crude oil price has gained over 3% ahead of OPEC Plus meeting expected to reach. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.me.